Welcome to Alternatify, the show where we peel back the layers of history to explore the roads not taken. Today, we journey back to a pivotal moment, a single day that irrevocably shaped the destiny of a nation and, arguably, the world. We are talking about October 14th, 1066. On that fateful day, the Battle of Hastings unfolded, a clash that saw the Anglo-Saxon forces of King Harold Godwinson face the Norman invaders led by William, Duke of Normandy. History tells us the Normans triumphed, forever altering England's trajectory. But what if Harold Godwinson had won? What if the Norman invasion had been thwarted? Imagine a world where the course of English history veered sharply from the path we know. Consider the profound implications for the English language, our legal system, the very architecture that defines our cities, and the intricate societal fabric woven over centuries. How different would our present be? Join us now, as we embark on a journey into a parallel reality. Let us explore the profound and far-reaching consequences of an Anglo-Saxon victory, a world where England remained truly English. To truly grasp the magnitude of this what if, we must first revisit the historical reality of 1066. That year began with the death of King Edward the Confessor, a childless monarch whose passing ignited a fierce struggle for the English throne. The stage was set for a monumental power vacuum. Three formidable contenders emerged, each with a claim to the crown. First, there was Harold Godwinson, the powerful Earl of Wessex, an Anglo-Saxon nobleman elected king by the Witenagemot, the Anglo-Saxon Council. His claim was rooted in tradition and the will of the English magnates. Then came William, Duke of Normandy, who asserted that Edward had promised him the throne years earlier, a claim bolstered by Harold's alleged oath of fealty to William. Finally, Harold Hardrada, the formidable king of Norway, a Viking warrior with a claim through a previous agreement with a Danish king, sought to reclaim England for a Scandinavian empire. Harold Godwinson faced an immediate and brutal challenge to his newly acquired kingship. No sooner had he been crowned than he was forced to march north to confront Harold Hardrada and his brother Tostig Godwinson, who had invaded Northumbria. Harold achieved a stunning victory at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, crushing the Viking threat. However, this triumph came at a tremendous cost, exhausting his army and leaving them far from the southern coast. Just days after Stamford Bridge, news arrived that William of Normandy had landed unopposed at Pevensey Bay, establishing a beachhead in Sussex. Harold, with his weary forces, was compelled to undertake a forced march south, covering over 200 miles in just a few days. This rapid deployment brought him to the ridge of Senlac Hill near Hastings, where he prepared for the decisive confrontation. The Battle of Hastings itself was a brutal affair. Harold's Anglo-Saxon forces formed a formidable shield wall, a defensive formation that proved incredibly resilient against the Norman cavalry charges and archers. For hours, the English line held firm, repelling wave after wave of Norman attacks. The Normans, frustrated, resorted to feigned retreats, drawing parts of the English line out of formation, only to turn and cut them down. Now for our what-if scenario. Imagine the Anglo-Saxon shield wall holds firm. The Norman charges are repulsed with even greater determination. Perhaps the feigned retreats are seen through, or the English discipline remains unbroken. In this alternative, William, Duke of Normandy, is not merely unhorsed, but is struck down, perhaps by a stray arrow or a determined Anglo-Saxon axe. His army, leaderless and demoralized, breaks and flees. Harold Godwinson, though wounded, stands victorious on Senlac Hill. With William defeated and his invasion fleet scattered, Harold Godwinson remains the undisputed King of England. His victory at Hastings, following so swiftly after Stamford Bridge, solidifies his rule and cements the Anglo-Saxon dynasty. England, for the first time in centuries, truly belongs to the English. The impact on language would be immediate and profound. The Norman conquest introduced a vast influx of Old French and Latin words into English, fundamentally reshaping its vocabulary and grammar. Without this influence, English would retain far more of its Old English roots. It would be a language much closer to its Germanic cousins like German or Dutch, with a richer native vocabulary and a different phonetic structure. Many common words we use today would simply not exist, replaced by Anglo-Saxon equivalents. Culturally, England would remain distinctly Anglo-Saxon. The Norman conquest brought with it a new aristocracy, new customs, and a new artistic sensibility. Without it, Anglo-Saxon traditions, art forms, and social norms would continue to evolve organically. Architectural development, for instance, would follow a different path. The grand Gothic cathedrals, a hallmark of Norman and later medieval design, might be delayed or never appear in the form we know them. Instead, we might see a continuation and elaboration of Anglo-Saxon Romanesque styles. The legal system would also diverge dramatically. The Norman conquest imposed a centralized feudal system of law, laying the foundations for what became English common law. An Anglo-Saxon victory would mean the continued evolution of Anglo-Saxon legal traditions, which were more decentralized and based on local customs and assemblies. Feudalism, as introduced by the Normans, might never take root, leading to a very different concept of land ownership and justice. Politically, England would likely remain a more decentralized kingdom. The Anglo-Saxon aristocracy, the powerful earls and thanes, would retain their influence and power rather than being replaced by a new Norman elite. The Witenagemot, the Council of Wise Men, would likely grow in power and influence, potentially evolving into a stronger, more representative form of parliament much earlier than in our timeline. This could lead to a more consultative and less autocratic form of monarchy. The social structure would also persist in its Anglo-Saxon form. The Norman conquest introduced a rigid, hierarchical class system, with the Norman elite at the top and the Anglo-Saxon peasantry largely subjugated. In our alternative history, the Anglo-Saxon social structure, with its emphasis on free peasants and a less rigid class system, would continue. This might foster a potentially more egalitarian society, where social mobility, though limited, was perhaps more fluid than under Norman feudalism. The Church in England would experience a vastly different trajectory. Post-conquest, the Norman kings asserted greater control over the English Church, bringing it more firmly under the influence of Rome and the papacy. An Anglo-Saxon victory would likely see the Anglo-Saxon Church retain its unique character and greater independence from Roman authority. This could have profound implications for the future, perhaps even altering the course of the Reformation centuries later, or leading to a distinct English Church that never fully broke from Rome in the same way. The relationships within the British Isles would also be fundamentally altered. The Norman conquest led to the eventual subjugation of Wales and the complex, often violent relationship with Scotland. Without the Norman drive for expansion and centralization, England's interactions with its Celtic neighbors might have been more peaceful, more cooperative, and less focused on conquest. The political landscape of the British Isles would be unrecognizable, perhaps leading to a confederation of independent kingdoms rather than a unified Great Britain. Globally, the absence of the Norman conquest would set England on a completely different trajectory. The Norman kings, with their continental ties and ambitions, propelled England onto the European stage in a way the Anglo-Saxons might not have. This could mean less inclination for overseas expansion or a different form of colonial empire, if any. The British Empire, as we know it, a global force that shaped continents, might never have come into being. The world map, the distribution of languages, and the very balance of global power would be profoundly different. Even the development of science and technology could be affected. The Norman conquest, while disruptive, also brought new ideas, administrative practices, and connections to continental European intellectual currents. An Anglo-Saxon England, while not necessarily stagnant, might follow a slower or different path of innovation. Its focus might be on different areas of development, perhaps more insular, and potentially less receptive to new ideas from abroad. The pace of technological advancement, particularly in areas like military engineering or navigation, could be significantly altered. Consider the lives of the key individuals involved. Harold Godwinson, the victor of Hastings, would remain King of England. His reign would be defined by the challenges of consolidating power, rebuilding after the Viking and Norman threats, and navigating the internal politics of the Anglo-Saxon aristocracy. He would shape England's future, facing the ongoing task of maintaining stability and prosperity. William the Conqueror, in this alternative history, would be a historical footnote, a failed invader whose ambition led to his demise. He would remain Duke of Normandy, his legacy confined to the continent, never to be known as the architect of a new English dynasty. His impact on world history would be negligible. Other figures, the Anglo-Saxon aristocracy, would retain their power and influence, continuing their traditional roles. The common people, the free peasants and burghers, would live under a different social and economic system, one that might offer more autonomy and less rigid class stratification than the feudal system imposed by the Normans. Their daily lives, their customs, and their sense of identity would remain rooted in Anglo-Saxon traditions. However, an Anglo-Saxon victory would not be without its potential downsides. One significant concern is stagnation. While the Normans brought disruption, they also brought new ideas, administrative techniques, and connections to the more advanced parts of continental Europe. Without this influx, England might become more insular, potentially leading to a slower pace of intellectual and technological development. Internal conflict could also remain a persistent threat. The Anglo-Saxon period was often characterized by power struggles and rebellions among the powerful earls. Harold's victory, while decisive, might not entirely eliminate these internal divisions. Continued power struggles within the Anglo-Saxon aristocracy could lead to periods of instability and civil strife. Vulnerability to external threats would also persist. While the Norman threat was neutralized, other groups, particularly the Vikings, might still pose a danger. A strong, unified Anglo-Saxon England might deter them, but the possibility of renewed invasions from Scandinavia or even other continental powers would remain. The absence of the Norman military innovations might leave England less prepared for future conflicts. Finally, there are the missed opportunities. The Norman conquest, despite its brutality, brought England into closer contact with continental European culture, administration, and military practices. It laid the groundwork for a powerful, centralized state and a unique legal system that would eventually influence much of the world. Without it, England might have developed in a more isolated fashion, potentially missing out on certain advancements or cultural exchanges that proved beneficial in our timeline. Let us fast forward to the present day in this alternative reality. The most striking difference would undoubtedly be the language. English, as we know it, would be unrecognizable. It would be a language much closer to German or Dutch, with a predominantly Germanic vocabulary and grammar. Imagine trying to read Shakespeare or even a modern newspaper and finding it almost entirely alien. Our very thoughts would be structured differently. Culturally, the modern world would be distinctly Anglo-Saxon. Traditions, customs, and artistic styles would have evolved from a different route. Perhaps our architecture would feature more timber-framed buildings, our music would draw from different folk traditions, and our literature would reflect a different set of myths and heroes. The very essence of British identity would be profoundly altered, less a blend of Anglo-Saxon, Norman, and Celtic, and more purely Germanic. Politically, the form of government would likely be more decentralized. The Witnagemot, having evolved into a powerful parliament, might have created a system where regional powers held more sway and the monarchy was more constrained. The concept of a strong, centralized state might never have fully developed, leading to a different balance of power between the crown and its subjects. Socially, the class system would be less rigid. The legacy of Anglo-Saxon free peasants and a less stratified society might mean a more fluid relationship between different social groups. The concept of inherited nobility might be less entrenched, and opportunities for advancement might be based more on merit or local standing than on a rigid feudal hierarchy. Globally, England's influence would have followed a different trajectory. Without the Norman impetus for expansion and the subsequent development of a powerful navy and centralized state, the British Empire as we know it might never have existed. This would mean a world without British colonization in India, North America, Australia, or Africa. The global map, the distribution of languages, and the political landscape of entire continents would be profoundly different. The very concept of a global superpower might have emerged from a different nation entirely. Technologically, the path of development would have diverged. While innovation would still occur, it might have focused on different areas, perhaps more on agricultural advancements or localized crafts, rather than large-scale industrialization or global trade networks. The pace and direction of scientific discovery could have been entirely different, leading to a modern world with different technological priorities and capabilities. This exploration, of course, is pure speculation. We are peering into a mirror of what might have been, not what was. Yet, by imagining these alternative paths, we gain a deeper understanding of the forces that shaped our own history. We appreciate the profound impact of seemingly small events and the intricate web of cause and effect that defines our past. We have journeyed through a world where England remained Anglo-Saxon, a world shaped by the triumph of Harold Godwinson at Hastings. We have seen how a single battle, a single moment, could have rippled through centuries, altering language, culture, politics, and even the global balance of power. It is a glimpse into a truly unconquered isle, a nation that developed on its own terms. What other consequences do you imagine for this alternative history? How would the world be different if the shield wall had held? Share your thoughts and insights in the comments below. If you found this journey into the past thought-provoking, please like this video, share it with fellow history enthusiasts, and subscribe to Alternatify for more explorations of the roads not taken. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Until next time, keep questioning history.